His mind was filled with terror as the limeroots were severed by iron talons that grabbed his soul. There were visceral screams and moans and the sound of crushing bones as the birds from hell flew him to his new home.
Another politician has just taken center stage.
Night Dreams Talk Radio Network brings you The World Paranormal News with James Creechbaum. Now, the latest news.
I'm James Creechbaum, and here's some more Earth news, or outer space news this time. NASA scientists detect huge thermonuclear blasts deep in space. NASA recently detected a massive nuclear explosion coming from outer space. The culprit seems to be a distant pulsar, the Space Agency reports, which is the stellar remains of a star that blew up in a supernova but was too small to form a black hole. NASA spotted the burst because it sent out an intense beam of X-rays that got picked up by the agency's orbital observer, NICER. All in all, it serves as a potent reminder space is an extremely dangerous, extremely metal place. The August explosion released in 20 seconds the same amount of energy our sun would need 10 days to unleash. According to research published in the Astrophysical Journal Letters last month, the burst was outstanding. NASA astrophysicist Peter Bolt, who led the research, said in NASA's statement, "We see a two-step change in brightness, which we think is caused by the ejection of separate layers from the pulsar surface. The other features that will help us decode the physics of these powerful events. Astronomers think the thermonuclear explosion was caused by helium that sunk beneath the surface of the pulsar and fused into a ball of carbon. Then the helium erupts explosively and unleashes a thermonuclear fireball across the entire pulsar surface." And that's how they explain that. Now, on to scientists say travel to parallel universe when we dream. So scientists are saying that when we dream every night, humans have an average of 6 to 10 dreams. A few minutes after being awoken, these dreams are usually forgotten. However, what if there's actually meaning to dreams that would make them more lucrative to remember? Scientists say we travel to parallel universe when we dream. Modern science, as well as Native American tribes and Mexican nations, believe that we, or at least our brains, visit a parallel universe when we dream. This would explain why humans can dream in color and can sense with all 5 feelings what's happening within the dream. If you've ever dreamed of eating your grandmother's signature apple pie per se, have you ever realized that it feels like you can taste and smell a delicious pie in front of you? Or maybe you've dreamed of riding a roller coaster and felt the thrill of riding it as it climbs up the steep hills and rushes down the ramps. Mystics also believe that there are places where dreaming takes place, but have related it to supernatural beings such as ghosts and spirits. However, since 1920, scientists have been trying to avoid such questionable beings. And in their quest to find the ideal place of nuclear particles to host dreams, they realized that such a formation would be impossible on Earth. Thus, they shifted to the argument away from the supernatural and into the arguably more confusing field of physics. Now, on to rare cancers are spreading among sea creatures, and that has scientists perplexed. A long time ago, though, we don't know how long a bay mussel somehow in the northern hemisphere developed leukemia-like cancer. It began as a mutation in a single rogue cell, which copied itself over and over and over again and spread through the mussel's hemolymph and blood-like fluid in its body. But then the cancer did something it was not supposed to do, or so we thought. It somehow spread to other mussels through the water, cloning itself again and again. And these new hosts, the malignancy, continued to proliferate and infect new individuals. Even stranger still, the disease didn't remain in bay mussels alone. It's now been found to into other shellfish species on opposite ends of the world. Blue mussels in France and Chilean mussels in Argentina and Chile. This finding described in its latest in series of studies showing that transmittable cancers are more common than previously believed, especially in the ocean. This new field of research could help us better understand how cancer develops in both animals and humans, as well as illuminate the murky lives of marine creatures.
From our compound, from the West Coast to the East Coast to worldwide, both on the internet and terrestrial radio, you're listening to Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark.
And here I am with our guest tonight, Terry Lovelace, James Krischbaum did the Earth News. And let's get back with Terry because, you know what, as I was mentioning before, I think when people are being abducted, they're being implanted with thoughts that this abduction was good. I don't know. Hi, Terry.
Hi. Glad to be back with you, Gary.
Well, I'm glad to have you back.
Well, I'm excited. I wanted to make a comment about the author of Owl Messengers is a gentleman named Mike Cleland, who you've had on, I think. I happen to know Mike very well. He is from the coldest place on the planet, up in upstate New York. I remember when I lived in Vermont, and I watched the news. It was always the coldest spot in all of New England. It was just bitter cold all the time. I mean, and he's a good guy. We've had long talks about this subject, and I mean, I don't know how many owls you've seen in your life. I'm kind of a city kid, but I live in a place near Dallas that I've got a tree line in back of me, and I can't let my cat out in the yard unsupervised because we got bobcats. So there's wildlife around here. And I think in my entire life, I've maybe seen 4 or 5 owls. And I'm talking to Mike, and he has seen not just dozens, but dozens of them, dozens and dozens. I mean, all kinds of owls. And it makes me wonder if you're not spot on. I mean, I think you got something there. I mean, I think that there's a mask there, What he's seeing as a friendly owl, it may not be a friendly owl. I don't know if he told you about the water tank incident or not.
I don't. I hate to say it. I have so many guests on. I vaguely remember having them on.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Let me just tell it real quick.
Yeah, please do. Please.
It's worth knowing. He was out camping, and he thought the sun had come up. And he came out, and it was dark. And he thought, that's odd. And he went back inside the tent. And then there was a wolf that he saw outside his tent. And they just stared at one another. And that was it. The next morning, they wake up, and they notice that on top of this hill, there's this huge water tower. Not the kind that are on stilts that are up in the air, but the kind that are kind of squat and circular, like a big cylinder on the ground. Painted gray, with the red light on the top. And they thought, holy cow, I'd never noticed that there before. They went back. They can't ever find it. It doesn't exist because it wasn't a water tower. And I don't think it was a wolf either. And I don't think every owl he's seen is an owl. So, yeah, agreeing with you.
Yeah, I just find even, I got 2 acres of cedar trees. When I first moved here, Terry, I live in Gig Harbor, Washington. It's on the other side of Tacoma, over the peninsula. You have to go across a bridge. It's like over a mile long to get here. And, I'm surrounded by water. It's a beautiful area. When I first moved here about 20 years ago, it was hardly any houses where I'm at. I mean, it was all cedar trees, and slowly people sold their, property, and then they got, logged out, and there's houses everywhere. I still had 2 acres of cedar trees. But I can tell you, I have 2 owls that hang around my property. And when I actually used to, when I first moved here, there was a big one that used to hang off of our decking. And you go out there at night, it would look at you. It wouldn't fly away. It wasn't scared of humans. It just, it was there. I got woodpeckers. I have coyotes in the area. We used to have bear when I first moved here. We don't have that. We don't even have deer hardly anymore. But, I got a lot of raccoons, and I got a whole bunch of other, strange little creatures. But I'll tell you, owls, when somebody starts telling me, especially when they're they work for wildlife department for a state, and they're out in the field every day, and all of a sudden they started seeing owls after they were abducted, tells me for a period of time maybe they were watching him. And I just can't see that somebody all of a sudden is seeing owls everywhere. It doesn't make logical sense to me when they weren't before. And when I mentioned that to him, I could hear, the thought in his mind going, hey, what can I say? Because I think they implant stuff in you that even when they abduct you the second or third or fourth time, you don't, at least a lot of people don't even realize they're being abducted at that point because they have been conditioned and brainwashed.
Right. And, it's kind of evidence that his brain has maybe been tampered with if that strikes a nerve, because that shouldn't strike a nerve. If you say, well, that's kind of outside the law of probability to see that many owls in a lifetime, that he should say, well, maybe so. That is odd, yeah. But instead it strikes a nerve, and that may be telling in and of itself.
Well, you being a assistant attorney general and being a lawyer and going through law school and maybe it wasn't your practice least towards last of your, but it's the Stockholm effect. Somebody, like somebody's with somebody who's committed a major horrible crime, and all of a sudden they're helping the person because 1, they're frightened, 2 is they're in shock and they don't realize, and all of a sudden they become friends with the murderer or the guy who did the crime. Well, it's the same thing. They've been abducted, and all of a sudden it's the same thing. It's the Stockholm effect. Now all of a sudden,
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, they think that these aliens are here to help us. And again, I don't think so. I mean, have you ever seen? I'm sure you've seen cattle mutilations, but human mutilations. When you see a couple pictures of those, it makes you really ill, where you can't sleep. I had a government agent. It sent me a year and a half ago a whole bunch of pictures, like 4 or 5 different cases of human mutilations. And when you look at those, I tell you, I finally took them off the computer recently because I find myself going back and looking at them, and it was to the point it wasn't healthy. But
it's not.
Another thing, a famous, I can't think of his name, pathologist, the recent cattle mutilations in Oregon, he actually spoke up and said, hey, something is more strange here and people aren't catching it. When they're mutilating these cattle or the bulls or whatever, right? They're alive when this is going on. They're not putting them down. They're still standing when they remove their eyes and start doing whatever they're doing. When they're, going through and with their lasers or whatever equipment they're doing. And the reason why he said this is if you remove the eyes, let's say from a bull or a cow, right? You have liquid between the eyes and the brain that would run out. Now, if the animal was laying down, it would run off the side of their face. In these cases, the liquid is running out to the nostrils, which then he surmises that they're standing up when this is going on. They're alive when this is going on. They're not being sedated or anything. They're still standing. So does that show compassion for a human or even a bull or a cow or a deer or whatever they're mutilating, whatever they're experimenting on? What are they doing? And it tells me they don't care. They just have no feelings. It's not all, Donna Reed show feelings that people have. and what these creatures have.
Yeah.
So when these
Yeah.
people come to me and say, well, they're here to protect us, I really feel like, wow, what have you been smoking?